And so after he paid me off, I started looking for a job. I'd apply for any kind of positions that your Tio Homer used to tell me. You're a damn liar, man. You don't know how to weld. And I told him, that's right. But if I get an hour's work, at least I can get some money. So anyway, time goes by, time goes by, and I can't find anything. The $300 that I had was almost gone. So I uh, I said, well, there's nothing else to do, but I guess I have to go for welfare. I didn't want to do it, but I guess I'll have to go for welfare. So I went to the welfare office and I told the lady my story, what was happening and everything. And she looked at me and she told me, says, honey, she says, I wish I could help you. But the state law is that you have to be in the state at least 6 months to qualify for welfare. Okay, well, if that's a law, that's a law. And she reached into her pocket and she gave me a $20 bill and she says, here, you buy some food for your children and I hope you find something. So she gave me $20, Ross.
Mm-hmm.
So I kept going and looking, couldn't find anything. So I got to the point that I figured, well, I'm always been a good Catholic. I go to church and I drop money on the plate. I'm going to see if they can help me. I went into the church and I talked to a priest and I told him what happened. I says, I'd like for the church to lend me $100. I says, I won't be able to pay you back your money right away, but believe me, I will pay you your 100 plus. And the priest told me, he says, sorry, but you don't have no collateral. When he said that, you would have think that a stick had been shoved. So I said, you teach us from day one, obey the commandments. I said, the commandment says, there's one says, thou shalt not steal. I says, if I know that bread box over there has money, I'm liable to come tonight and break it so that my children can live. I says, another commandment says, thou shalt not kill. I says, if I know you got money in your pocket, I'm liable to kill you so that my family survives. And I walked home, and your Memo, he was always, praying and the saints and all. I told her we were not going to church no more. I'm finished with the church. And she couldn't understand why I was so mad. But I continued looking for work. So then one day, so one day I went to this place. Oh, Kay, the neighbor that lived in the upstairs in the backyard, she asked me, she says, Juan, can you take me to the store? I gotta buy some groceries. I says, yeah. She says, I'll give you gas for the car. I says, okay. So I says, let me tell Daddy. So I went and told my mom I was going to take Kate to the store. So we pulled into the service station. Gasoline then was 14 cents a gallon. And I told the guy, I says, put about 75 cents worth. No, 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 don't you do that. You fill it up. I said, okay, this is a 28-gallon tank. You fill it up until it runs over. So I filled it up. I I went to the store. She said, well, I'd like to go to the store up in East LA. I said, well, you tell me how to get there. So we got down to East LA there on Brooklyn and where the 710 freeway is. The store is still there. And I got a shopping cart. I said, I'll take the shopping cart and you get what you want. Well, we'd be going and she'd putting on the bottom tray this and this and this. And then pretty soon she'd put some on the little tray on top. And I figured, well, maybe she's going to use that when she gets home and the rest you can put up later. When I got out of there, Ross, that basket was full. So she told the clerk, do me a favor, please. Put all of this here that's in this little cart in a bag for me, and the rest you can put on the others. So yes, ma'am. So I put everything in the trunk of the car, and I went to the house, and I says, let me tell Teddy that well, I'm home, and I'll take the groceries to you, okay? She says, oh no, 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 no. This bag is mine only. The rest is for you. She says, I know that you've been without work, but I know that you come home from looking from work and you're not mad. You start cleaning the yard, working, doing, playing with your children. She says, I noticed all of that. She says, as a matter of fact, I'm going to give you my phone number. And if you go for an interview, if they want a telephone number, you can give my number and I'll call you in case they call you. I says, okay. So next day I went to Crawford Shopping Center. It was a grocery chain. It was about 5 stores. As a matter of fact, I think it was in 1952, Crawford, he had won the Indy 500. So I went and I talked to this man named Mr. Kramer. And I was telling him what I used to do. And he says, oh, I checked. I wish I had known. He says, I just hired a man. And but let me see, maybe I can move things around and tell him not to come in. I said, no. I said, you won't do that. I said, that man was looking for a job when he came here. So it's not fair for you to give me the job and put him without a job. And he told me, he said, you're right. Give me your phone number and I'll call you if I see or hear of anything. So I gave him the number. I got home and I wasn't home maybe 10 minutes. And Miss Kay calls me. They want you on the phone. So I ran over up there to pick up the phone, and it was Mr. Kramer. He says, after you left, one of the stores called me that they have to strip the floor and re-wax it. So it's an all-night job, but at least you can make a few hours if you care for it. I said, give me the address. So he gives me the address. He said, yeah, you start at 8:30 at night and it'll be all night until around 9 o'clock in the morning. I says, okay. So I used to have a map of Los Angeles and I'd look for the routes how to get there. And I used to live on Vermont. And if I go right north on Vermont, I'd run into Las Feliz, and Las Feliz is Glendale. So then I said, if I go right down Vernon, I'll hit the 110 freeway, the Harbor Freeway, and it goes into the 101, and then I take the 101, and I get off at Vermont. I says, I'm be making a wrong turn. So I said, I'll just leave a little bit earlier. All I had for money, Ross, was 25 cents. But I wasn't worried now because, hey, I had a job for at least a few hours. So I says, I got to be there at 8:30. I got to leave in plenty of time. So I told my baby, I says, honey, I says, I'll see you tomorrow. I'm leaving early so I can get there in time. So she kissed me goodbye and I went to work. So I'm going down Vermont, and there on 3rd Street, there was a restaurant. And I stopped and I said, well, I'll see how much coffee is. And if I can afford it, I'll get a cup of coffee. So I went into the restaurant and I took the menu and I flipped the pages and then I flipped them back and I flipped them and looking. All I wanted to find out how much coffee was. When I read that coffee was 10 cents, I says, I'm not too hungry. Just give me a cup of coffee, please. Well, at that time, they used to give you 3, 4 cups for the same price. So I drank all the coffee I wanted. Ross, what happened next, you won't believe. When she gave me the bill, it slipped out of my hands and it rolled and went under where I had my feet and it landed right on top of a $20 bill. I could even left a 15-cent tip. So I went and worked all night. In the morning, Carl calls Mr. Kramer up and he says, Mr. Kramer, if you let this man go, you're making a mistake. He's a hard worker and he knows what he's doing. So Mr. Kramer calls me and tells me, Juan, he says, it never dawned on me, but starting Monday, they're going to start taking their vacations and it's 3 weeks off each store. And it's 5 stores, that's 15 weeks you have of work if you want to work. I says, I'll be there. So I says, okay. So I went and he says, you can start here in this store. So he told me the breakdown. He says, first thing, once the store closes, you got to go around and make sure everything is locked. I said, okay. So I did it for a couple of weeks. And one day I walked by his office and the safe was wide open. Ross, there were stacks of bills of 20s, maybe about 8 inches high, about 4 stacks. And I seen it, I said, Jesus, I said, I wonder if somebody tried to break in or broke in. I was going to call the store detective and tell him what happened. Then I got to thinking, if Mr. Kramer forget to close the safe and I tell on him, they're liable to fire him. So I'm going to just take a gut feeling and wait until he comes in the morning. So I waited because he came in around 9 o'clock and I used to get off at 8. So I waited for him to get there And he walked in the office. I walked with him, and I closed the door. I said, "Mr. Kramer, I need to talk to you." He says, "What one?" I says, "Last night I forgot to check to see if the place was locked. And then it reminded me around 12 o'clock, and I made the rounds, and I found that your safe was open." I says, "If there's any money missing, I didn't take a penny of it." I said, "So I took it on myself. I closed the safe and rolled the tumblers so they couldn't open it." He says, he says, "I woke up during the night, and that's the first thing that came to my mind. Did I lock the safe or didn't I?" He says, "Thank you for not calling the store detective. He'll probably pardon me." I said, "No problem." So then, maybe about a week before, your memo had seen on the paper that they were hiring pipe fitters for the school board. So she told me about it. So I went and I applied for it. Now, there was 270 something taking the test. Now, I applied for a helper and I applied for a journeyman because I have a license plate a diploma for plumber, a diploma for pipe fitter, a diploma for gas fitter, and a diploma for steam fitter. They're almost the same trades, but there's difference.
Right.
So I took the written test. On the helper, I made number one on the list. Now, if I made number one on the list for helper, you figure maybe he's in the top 15, 20 of the journeyman. I was 179 on the list. But I didn't care. Hey, I had my foot in the door.
Right.
So I went to Mr. Kramer. I said, "Mr. Kramer," I says, "Sir," I says, "this is what I did, and this is my trade, and I have a chance to get maybe a good retirement." I says, "I'd like to give you 2 weeks notice." He says, "One, you've got 'em." He says, "But let me tell you something right now, Juan." He says, "If you go to work for the school board and you find out that a week later you don't like working for the school board, you come back to me and you go to work that day. If you come a month later, you come back to me and you go to work that day. If it's a year from now, you come back to me." He says, "You got a job." I said, "Well, thank you, Mr. Kramer. I appreciate it. Now," I says, "I'll tell you," I says, "if I can ever be of any help to you, let me know. I'll try to work with you." Well, that's when the flu was going around a lot. So they called me from the stores that if I could go and work maybe 4 or 5 hours, so kind of clean up the store so that I could, be ready. I was working maybe about 17 hours a day between the school board and the Crawfords. So I still thank Mr. Kramer for all he did. He was a wonderful person. But then I worked for the school board until I retired, 32 years. And it was worth it.
Let's talk about that real quick because you came into the school board where it was very white. That's the best way you can put it.
Well, you see, that's it. At that time, when I went to work for the school board, I'd go into the office and I talked to Mr. His name was Butler, Tracy Butler. He was the supervisor, and he told me, he says, Juan, he says, go to this school here over here. The man's putting the boiler, retubing, and he may need some help. See if you can get along with him. So I go to the school, and Coleman Baker was his name. He told me, well, we got to retube the boilers. And I says, okay. I says, where do you want it to get? Do you want it to cut on the front or do you want it to cut in the back? He says, well, you take the back and I'll take the front and we'll cut the tubes and let them drop and take them out. And that's hard work, using a torch, confined area. When we got to the shop that afternoon, the next morning, Coleman told Butler, he says, don't you take this man away from me. Because he knows what he's doing. This other bunch of lazy guys, they don't know shit. But as soon as I'd go out the door, I could hear the journeyman telling Butler, get rid of that greaser. Once you let a greaser in, you're going to have to let the rest of them in. And they used to call the black people, the custodians, they were just pushing the broom. There were no supervisors.
Mm-hmm.
They were all white. And they treated them like worse. So I managed to work. I served my probation. I'd take the test for journeyman. I'd pass the written. They'd hire somebody from the outside. Well, Juan, you went over to Belmont High and you measured and kind of figured how to repipe the building. I said, yes. Well, take Carter back with you and show him how we work and everything. So here I go. This way and this. Juan, I really appreciate what you're doing. You're being very helpful to me. He says, don't worry. He says, as soon as my probation is over, he says, I'm going to put in a good word for you. Huh. So, anyway, I finally made it. The peso written and everything. But now they changed the law. The law was so they could get around. What was that?
Go ahead, keep talking.
They changed the law. Now that discrimination.
Yeah, affirmative action.
Yeah, affirmative action. Mm-hmm. So they, I was thinking of talking to Rudy Luna, Frank Loya, Mo Corona, and myself about the injustice. And they said, well, why don't we start an association, the Mexican American School Board Association, but in our bylaws we will not discriminate against anybody. Anybody can join our association. So we started it. Well, we had almost 1,400 members in the school board. Whites and everybody that were in the low polls that got passed over and passed over because of the system. So later on, I got into the heating position. And we started the Heating and Ventilation Association. I was the president of that for about 14, 15 years. And I was the president of the Mexican American Association also for a long time until I retired. So we made a lot of changes.
You did.
As a matter of fact, one day I went to one of the retiree dinners because I still held them for the old guys that worked. And Frank, son of Esteban, so he says, "What?" I forgot what his name was. He says, "Here," he said, "I want to introduce you to a friend of mine, Juan Garcia." He says, "Are you Juan Garcia?" I said, "Yes, I am." He says, "You don't know it." He said, "You don't know it." He says, "But you're a legend in the school board. They were scared of you." Well, they were because at one time, Mr. Mosley, who was a plant manager, he was black, but now he was a plant manager. And his wife worked for the superintendent of the schools, told Mosley that they had a position for me downtown. And if I'd take it. And I told him, "Nope, I don't want a position downtown." And Mosley asked me, he said, "Why? Why, Juan? Just think, suit, necktie, and,
No more
no
getting
more
dirty.
crawling or nothing
Yeah.
like that." I said, "No," I said, "because what they want to do is give me a desk and put it in a corner and tell me you put this paper from here to here and then from here to there and to here to there and looking at the wall only. They just wanted me to keep my mouth shut." So,
I can't imagine that at all. At all.
yeah, so that's what happened. That's what happened.
We're going to keep recording, but we're going to bounce around real quick here because one of the things that we haven't mentioned that in 1958, that's when Sam was born.
What?
Sam was born.
Oh, yeah.
Sam was born September
September the 11th, 9/11.
9/11 of 58.
58, right.
58. So
I-
he's the only one of the four kids that was born here in California.
Right,
They all were pretty much raised here in California,
right,
but he's the only one that was actually born here in California.
right. He was the only one. The youngest one was Rosemary. She was months old, 57. She was about a year or something when we moved over here. I tell you that we went through some difficult time. I was telling you that I told my wife we will never go to church again.
Right.
I'm gonna have to go back and restate my statement. I told her that. Then we bought this house. This house here was a repossessed house. We paid $13,000 for it. But I'd come home from work after work, and the dump was right up here in the hill, less than a half a mile. I'd take the trash and throw it in the dump and make a couple of trips, and then until I got it clean. But at that time, the school board was a family. One trade would help another.
Right.
Nowadays, if you help somebody out of the trade, and let's say something happens, something falls on you,
Right.
they're liable to fire you and fire the other guy. So I remember going down the hallway and the carpenter was putting up a beam. So I took my pouch off, and here comes an electrician. He took his pouch off, and we picked up the beam, and we put it in place and held it while he nailed it. My supervisor came by, and he says, "Good one." He says, "Because one of these days you may need help." and there'll be somebody to help you.
Well, even when I was growing up in the house in the 70s, when I was a kid, I can still remember. I can't remember names, but I can remember guys from the different trades. They would come over if you needed help as side work or doing something at the
Remember
house.
the tree we knocked out here, a big
Yeah.
one?
I remember that.
Well, but before you were even born, before when we moved here, I went and I asked my friends, painters. I says, "Hey, Art, could you give me? Could you have about a gallon two of spare paint? What do you want paint for?" I said, "Well, we just bought a house."
This was just before you guys. This was when you guys were getting ready to move into the house, right?
Yeah, we didn't want to move in
And be doing the work while
yeah.
you were after you moved in. You wanted to do it before.
So I said, "Well, I bought a house and it's kind of trashed, and I want to paint it before we move in." He says, "Where's the place at?" So I told him. He says, "What time are you going to go there tomorrow, Saturday?" I says, "Yeah." He says, "What time will you be there?" I says, "I'll be there by 7 o'clock." He goes, "Okay." He says, "We'll see you there." So I went home and I told my wife that some of the guys are going to help me, paint the house. One of the guys, Art, when we got here Saturday morning, there was 5 painters. There was nothing hanging on the walls or nothing. I had already cleaned them with TSP, and Art told me, he says, "Juan, you're not a painter, and we want to make a first class job on this. So I'm going to give you a job that you can do." He says, "I'm going to let you paint the linen closet." He says, "But I want to be sure that you get every corner. I'm going to go and look at it and make sure." Well, I didn't know what they were up to. So I started painting inside of there, and pretty soon I'm even talking to myself, and I could hear them laughing. So they say, I came out. I did. What happened? I was in an enclosed area, and there was alcohol base paint. It got me so high, I was like if I had drunk up 10 gallons of whiskey. But they painted all my inside of the house in one day. Everything. And then it says, "Okay, what color do you want for the outside?" I said, "Well, my wife likes a kind of a gray." "Okay." So that's the color it is. One day I told Paul Monrango, because he was a paint supervisor, and it was a real cold winter. And he says, "Juan," he says, "do you have any idea what might be wrong with my heater? It's nothing but throwing but cold air." I says, "Is it on?" He says, "Yeah, but it doesn't work." I says, "Where do you live?" He says, "I live in San Fernando."
The other valley.
Yeah. I said, "Well," I says, "give me a map how to get to your house. I'll see you tomorrow around 7 o'clock in the morning." "Okay." He gives me the address. Next morning, I'm there knocking on the door, and he says, "Juan," he says. I says, "I told you I'd be here at 7. Let's start looking at, see what seems to be the problem." And I started looking at it, and by God, the fire was on and everything, but the air was cold. So I says, "You got a ladder so I can get up on the roof? I mean, the attic?" He says, "Yeah." So he got it. And I got up, well, up in there in the ductwork, they had a T that had a damper. And in the summer months, they'd open the damper full blast, and the furnace would come on with no heat and create like a vacuum and blew cold air around the house, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I says, hey, I was just, have you got some WD-40? So yeah, so he got it for me, and I loosened it, and I start screwing the damper, and I got it to close. As soon as I closed it, uh, I forgot her name now, may she rest in peace. She says, Paul, we got heat in the house now. So I got down, I says, there it is. I said, that's all it was. I said, the damper was open. He said, well, all the supervisors and all of those, but none of them would want to come and look at it. And he says, how much do I owe you? I says, 2 words. Thank you. I said, that's all I want. I said, just thank you. I said, maybe one of these days you may have to do a favor for me. So you can count on it. So one day I told him about it. He came and sprayed all my sealants, acoustical. So he did a nice job.
Yeah, it did. All right, we're gonna take another break,
Okay.
and I think we'll do one more segment,